So in the first lecture, we took a look at how images are stored. We talked about, for example, JPEG, GIF, PNG, and so on. Okay, so essentially these are compression schemes. Okay, to be able to display an image, we have to uncompress them into a bitmap. Okay, and once we uncompress, okay, to a bitmap, then basically we have a 2D array of pixels. Okay, so every pixel, as we discussed, is basically a combination of red part, green part, blue part. Okay, so as we display an image, depending upon the resolution of the image, if it's a 1,000 by 1,000 image, then there will be 1,000 pixels in each row, 1,000 pixels, 1,000 rows as an example, right? So there's a lot of storage involved and also the processing time involved in creating a bitmap. So in the first part of the course, we'll be using C#. Then second part of the course, we'll switch to Python, so that you guys are comfortable at least taking a look at the code I provide and are able to modify it a little bit, as we discussed in the last lecture, to pick a JPEG file to display it in a picture box. The code was extremely simple, right? So you will say bitmap, which is a pre-built class, BMP equal to new bitmap, and then whatever the file name is. Okay, for example, if it's on the C drive or D drive, then let's say t1.jpg. Okay, so then what this, as we pass this file name to the constructor, and remember, if there's a single backslash, you'll replace it by 2 backslashes, because otherwise backslash t will be treated as a tab, as an example. So anyway, then if you created a form, okay, and let's say you, from the toolbox, you dragged and dropped a picture box over here. Anytime you drag and drop, you assign 2 properties. You assign typically a name property and a text property. For a picture box, suppose you gave it a name of pick1 once you dragged and dropped and placed it on your form. Okay, then as you saw, all you have to do is say pick1 dot image equal to BMP. And now it will display this picture, whatever that picture is over here, right? Okay, so today what we'll do is we'll take a look at the further processing of images. Okay, last time we talked about some simple processing. For example, so now let's take a look at processing an image. Okay, so we looked at how to brighten it. Okay, how to change it to grayscale. Okay, and also last time we looked at is how to enhance the contrast. And let me briefly refresh your memory for the 3 concepts we covered in the last lecture. Okay, brightening it was easy. Remember, as we read the image into a bitmap, right? Typically we use 8-bit color sorry, 24-bit color where R is 8 bits, G is 8 bits, B is 8 bits. In the 8-bit R or G or B, so if these are 8 bits, 8 bits. Okay, that means R will vary 0 through 255 on the decimal scale. This will vary 0 to 255, this will vary 0 to 255, right? Okay, so to brighten it, let's say in one of these pixels, R was, let's say, 45, G was, let's say, 123, B was, let's say, 100. So if we wanted to brighten it, for example, all we have to do is, let's say, add 20 to each. So this will become 65 after brightening. This will become 143. This will become 120 as an example, because if we were adding 20, right? Okay, so as part of your first assignment that I will put on the website, you will be recreating a program where I'm doing all of these things. And the name of the program or name of the application is Image Processing 2010. Okay. So for example, over there, I have put some buttons. So if I draw the UI, okay, so if this is, let's say, our form as an example. Okay, so one of the buttons over here will be the load picture. One of the buttons over here will be brighten and so on, right? Okay, so as I go to the computer, I'll show you. Once I click on the brighten button, what I do is I pop up a dialog, which looks like this, something like this, some value. You know, for example, you can type 20 and submit or something, right? Okay, so if you're new to C#, you know, very briefly, in 5 minutes, I'll give you an idea. How do we, if we needed to collect information from the user, and you click on a button, how do we make some dialog pop up so that the user can collect the information, and as soon as they click on the submit, then how do we collect it back from the user? So let me sidetrack for the benefit of those of you new to C#. Okay, so once you go to the Visual Studio, on the right-hand side is what we call the Solution Explorer. Okay, actually, let me do this. Let me go to the computer. This way you'll be able to see exactly. I'll just very quickly show you. Okay, so by the way, make sure you guys have Visual Studio installed. Okay, there's a free version available called Community Edition that you can download, right? So anyway, once you launch Visual Studio, for most of the projects that you will be doing where C# is involved, you will go File, New Project, as we discussed in the last lecture. Okay, So you will pick under Visual C# Windows Desktop and Windows.NET Framework application. Then you will create a folder on your C drive for the course. For example, I think I did it last time on the C drive. Let's say CPEG585 Spring 2019. Okay, so that's the location that I set over here. Then you'll give it a project name. Okay, let's call it Test App for right now. Okay, so that's the project name, Windows Forms, .NET Framework, Windows Desktop. Once I click OK, once it has created the infrastructure, right? So now let's say I wanted to put a button, and if somebody clicks on it, I wanted to collect like the brightness value, right? So if I go to the toolbox, I'll expand all Windows Forms and double click on a button. Okay, suppose I make this button right here. And now, like I said, for every control, like button is a control, picture box is a control, label is a control, right? What we do is we typically give them a name. So the name will be, let's say, BTN, let's call it brightness. So typically for a button, the 3-letter prefix is BTN. So basically, if you can see it, okay, I gave it the name BTN brightness. Oops. Make it a little bit bigger so that next time I have to show you something. Okay, so anyway, BTN brightness is the name property I gave it to the button. And the text property I can say, for example, brighten or something. So if I scroll down a little bit, there will be a text property. And suppose I say brighten. Okay, so anyway, so now the idea is if somebody clicks on it, will pop up another dialog and collect the number 20 or 30 from the user, right? So because we wanted to show another pop-up, first thing we'll do is we'll go to the project. At the very top, there's a solution. Below that is what we call the project. Okay, we always add classes or other forms to the project. So from the second top, I will say right-click and add new item. So I right-clicked and said add new item from the menu I chose, right? Then my suggestion will be once it shows up what kind of things you can add, make it name ascending so that in alphabetical order we can easily find. So now we're looking for another Windows form to be added to our project which will act as the dialog. So if you scroll down, you'll see towards the end there's a Windows form. By default, it will give it a name of form 2, okay? But let's say we call it form brighten because we wanted to collect the brightness information. So Windows form brighten, I click add. So now basically I have two forms, one with the button, which is form 1 over here. And if I double click on form brighten, this is what I just added, right? So in the form brighten, now I'll put a text box. So from the toolbox, I'll go to text box so that I can collect a number from the user. Okay, and then I'll put in a simple button over here. And let's call this button submit or something. So for this button, once it's selected, I'll call it BTN submit. Okay, and just submit as the text property. Okay, for the text box, I'll call it TXT brightness. So the name will be TXT brightness. Okay, Anyway, and I can make it smaller. I don't need it this big, so something small, right? Okay, so remember what's the name of this form? Form bright. Okay. When I run it, which form will show up first? This one or the form one? Form one. So when I run it, debug start without debugging is how we run it. You'll see will always show up as the main form, right? Now the idea is if I click over here, I wanted to show the form bright. So anyway, when we created this form brighten, what it did is it created a class representing this form, which is called form brighten. So the basic idea to display it is create an object of it and call the show dialog method on it. So if I now go to form one and double click on this button, so that if somebody clicks on it, we can show the other form. So if I double click on it, now I can say create one object of the other forms, which was called form brighten, if you recall. So let's say if I call it frm, suppose b equal to new. And again, if you're new to C#, after the new keyword, if you hit a space bar, it will always tell you what is it expecting you to type. So don't try to type form brighten again. You may make an uppercase, lowercase mistake. Just hit the tab key. So make a habit after the new keyword, space and tab. Okay, and then, so this will create one object of that form brighten. But right now it's in the memory of the computer, right? To make it visible, you have to say form1.show. Form b.show. Okay? So this is what we wrote in the click event handler. So if I run it, okay, now take a look. If I click over here, the other form shows up. Right? What happens if I click on the button again?
Nothing.
Another form shows up. Because see, it keeps creating another object of it, right? But we don't want many objects, we just want one of them. Okay. And also we want to collect the information from it. So if you wanted to display many forms so that they can, sometimes we do need this. So this is called modeless display. Okay. Now, if you wanted to show a form so that we can collect one piece of information from the form, that's called modal. Okay. So basically, to show another form side by side, use show method. Okay. To collect info from a form, display it in what we call it in modal manner by calling show dialog. Okay. So anyway, so our typical code will go something like this. If frmb dot. See, if I go to show, you'll see there's another option called show dialog equal to dialog result dot OK. Okay, so the idea is just display it and then wait until somebody cancels the form. Okay. Okay, should be O capital. Okay, so wait for it until somebody has typed the number and closed the form. Okay, so that it comes back with the result of OK. So now if I go back to the form brighten, what I will do is I'll select this button. Okay, this button, and there's a property called dialog result over here. Dialog result over here. Okay, so right now, if you take a look at my screen, even though it's pretty small, it's none. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll change it to OK, so that I know somebody actually clicked on the submit button, right? Okay, but then next question is, how will I know what was typed in the text box? So in the same form Brighton, I'll right click, view code, and I will expose a property. So I will say public, let's say, or let me say int brightness get. Okay, the text box, if you recall, was called txt brightness.text. Anytime we read the data from a text box, it's read as a string. So in C#, if you wanted to convert a string to a decimal, or an integer, whatever data type you wanted to convert it, one of the ways is to call in.parse if you wanted to convert that string to an integer, or double.parse if you wanted to convert it to, and I forgot the return statement. So basically, let me put it on the next line so that I can show it to you. So basically what I did is I added a public property, which basically, as you can see, reads the value, whatever was typed in the text box, okay, which will be a string. Then we convert it to a number, and we return it. So anybody from this form Brighton object, if they call the brightness, they'll be able to know what data was typed in the text box, right? Lastly, as soon as somebody clicks on the submit button, we want to make this form disappear. And the way that you do that is, and we already did that, so if I go that, for the submit button, if you set the, for any button, if you set the dialog result property, remember we had, where did dialog result go? Okay, we had set it to OK. So what that does is, as soon as you click on it, it disappears. Okay, so let me show it to you. Now if we run it, we click over here for display. Okay, anyway, I'll fix that in a second. But anyway, if I click submit, oops. Let me double check that I write the proper code. Oops. Give me 1 second. New error list. So by accident, I double-clicked on the submit button, so it ended up writing an event handler, which I needed to delete. So let me go to the form 1. Let me see what happened here. See, remember I have a show as well as a show dialog. That's why it was giving me an error. So I have to pick either to display it side by side or display it such that we can collect the information from it. So I have to comment it out. Okay, now take a look over here if I run it. Click over here, it shows up, right? If I click on the submit button, this will disappear. Why? Because for the submit button, I had set the dialog result property to OK. Okay. So now, how do we collect information from it? What number was typed? See, even though it disappears, it's still in the memory of the computer, as long as we are within this button handler, because we created it in the memory over here, right? So now we can say int brightness equal to FRMB. Remember we had created a public property called brightness. So we can read that and find out what's the brightness value, and if I wanted now to further pass it on to somebody else, I could do that. For right now, I'll just simply say message box.show brightness.toString. Okay, .toString is how we convert something to a string, very similar to Java. So if I run it now, click here. If I type, for example, 20, submit, this will go away, and now we have collected that 20, right? So anyway, going back to now your first assignment. Okay, in your first assignment, I'll put the updated code, so don't download it today yet. Wait till end of today so that I replace it with the latest version on the website. Okay, so if you take a look over here, I have a lot of forms over here. Like form 1 is our main form. Okay, so basically this is a picture box, this is a picture box, this is a text box, this is a label. Okay, and what are the names for each you can see. Then I put in a lot of buttons over here. Okay, so my suggestion to you is, so that you get better at it, create a new project and open this side by side, and then try to recreate each and every capability over here. Okay, so for example, if I run it, okay, and let's say I load an image. Okay, so whatever, and then suppose I wanted to brighten it, right? So as I click on this brighten image button, again you'll see dialog pops up. So how did I design that? I just added another form, put a text box, put one button brighten, one button cancel, and so that we can collect the information, right? So we collect it, it will brighten the image and show it over here. So anyway, okay, so now coming back to our learning. 3 simple things that we covered in the last lecture were how to make an image brighter, how to change it to grayscale, okay, and how to change the contrast, right? Okay, so so for that purpose, what I did is I added a class over here. So how do we add a class to the project? You right click on name of the project, you say add, and one of the options over here will be a class, or you can say add new item, and from our alphabetical list you can pick a class over here and give it a name, for example, my image proc. So that's what I did over here. So all the main thing that I would like you to learn and review is this particular class called my image proc. Okay, it has functions to load the image, to brighten it, to change to grayscale, to increase or decrease the contrast, to rotate it, to crop it, to resize it. So all those capabilities are given over here. Okay. So very briefly, let me go to the part, brighten part. Okay, where did the brighten go? Okay, so we discussed this in the last lecture, right? So this is the number, like 20 as an example, and as you can see, all it's doing is after we read each pixel, right? Okay, like take a look over here, this line as an example. Okay, in brightness, let me put a plus, make it easier to read over here. Okay, in brightness would be like the number 20 as an example. Okay, plus whatever is the current value of the red pixel value. So after we add it, it may exceed 255. So as we discussed in the last lecture, if it exceeds 255, after we add the brightness value, we make it the maximum because it cannot be more than, and very similarly, if somebody was reducing the brightness, it may become less than 0, then we make it 0. So we did this for all the 3 things, right? How do we convert it to a grayscale? Okay, here's the formula for converting to a grayscale. We multiply the red value by 0.299, then we multiply it by 0.587 to the green value and 0.114 to the blue value. And then we make the red, green, blue all the same value, whatever is this weighted average. So red becomes the same, green, and we call the set pixel and set it to this value, right? So if we run it very quickly, okay, so if I load one image, okay, and then if I wanted to convert it to grayscale, okay, so it will apply that weighted average formula and change it to the grayscale, okay. We covered the contrast also last time, so very briefly, contrast, what it does is it tries to separate out the pixel differences. Okay, the higher value pixels become higher, the lower value pixels become lower. So one simple technique was, okay, let's say we have some pixel value 87, 139, whatever, 55. Okay, so after we apply the contrast, okay, so we, if you recall, one easy technique was go to the midpoint, 255 by 2, and then based on what contrast somebody picked, whether they wanted to increase by 10 or 20 or whatever, right? So then 87 is below the, so the midpoint will be 127 or 128, right? So it's below, so based on this number, it will try to make it maybe 63. This is higher, so it will try to make it 145 as an example. This is lower, it may try to make it 45. So exactly how it does it, okay, you'll study the code. If I take you to the brightness, the contrast part. Okay, so anyway, this was our contrast, right? I could have left it to int over here. S byte is basically like a sign byte where this could be plus minus 20, okay, or plus minus 100. So anyway, here simply we are checking the range, whether the contrast should be within -100 and 100, that somebody can call it, right? So anyway, then just like I explained, we've determined the midpoint, and then based on the contrast specified, we try to increase or decrease it. So just go through the simple code over here, and essentially, like I said, if the pixel value is above the midpoint, it will make it even higher. If the pixel value is below the midpoint, it'll try to make it lower. Okay, so experiment through this, and the net effect for this, you can see is, if I go to the contrast as this third button, so if I pick, let's say, 30. Okay, so you can see it tries to do, right, if I pick -30,